The first time she understood the alien king truly meant to erase her. It was not when he spoke the verdict in the throne hall, but when the royal historian walked past her like she was invisible and poured black ink over her name on a golden tablet while she was still breathing. The sound of that ink hitting metal was soft, yet it felt louder than war horns, and the old queen, once called Lyris of the Ninth Aurora, felt her chest tighten as if the palace itself had decided she no longer belonged to heir. She had been his first wife, chosen before the wars, before the empire spread its flags across moons, before the king's face hardened into stone. And in those early years, she had believed loyalty could become love if she endured long enough. She endured everything. She endured the cold rituals where priestesses tied her wrists and pressed freezing crystals to her stomach while chanting for life. She endured the doctors who spoke to her body like it was a broken tool. She endured the nobles who smiled at her in daylight and whispered barren when her back turned. Every cycle she waited for a child that never came, and every cycle she watched the king drift farther away, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment, like a star slowly going dark. When the seers declared the final sentence, the court reacted as if a storm had finally passed, and the king rose from his throne without hesitation. He did not scream. He did not accuse. He simply said she could not carry an heir, and the empire could not carry her. And then he turned to the younger bride, waiting in silk behind the pillars, a girl with bright eyes and a political bloodline. Lyris tried to speak, but her voice did not come, because she suddenly understood her value in their world had never been her mind or her heart. Only a future child they could place like a crown. Guards stepped forward. They removed her royal bands. They cut the thread that linked her to the palace network. They tore off the cloak that marked her rank. She felt the air on her arms and realized she had not felt real air in years, only perfumed halls and lies. A counselor leaned close and hissed that she should be grateful the king was allowing her to live, and she almost laughed because life without name, without home, without meaning, felt like a slower execution. She was sent to Varos, a mining planet on the outer rim, a gray world where clouds hung low and the ground was scarred by machines that never slept. The transport ship was filled with the discarded, criminals, debtors, soldiers who had failed, and she sat among them like a ghost, too ashamed to lift her head. When the ship doors opened, cold dust rushed in and coated her tongue. An overseer scanned her and smirked when he saw her age. He assigned her to the deepest pits. The first day she lifted stone until her joints screamed. The second day her hands split and bled. The third day she fainted and woke to a boot pressing into her ribs, the overseer telling her to die after her shift, not during it. In the barracks, the other workers stared at her soft features and old scars, and they guessed she had once been someone, and that made them hate her more. Because suffering is jealous and does not like reminders that there are different kinds of pain. At night she stared at the ceiling panels and tried to remember what the palace smelled like, but all she could smell was metal and sweat and the bitter sting of chemicals. She began to speak to herself in whispers, not prayers, because she did not believe any god listened, but stories, because stories were the last place she could still be a person. She told herself she was not barren. She was simply unfinished, but the words sounded weak. Weeks turned into months. Her hair grew thin. Her posture bent. Her eyes dulled. She stopped saying her name because no one answered it. Then the alarms came. They were not the usual mining warnings. These were war alarms. Red lights flooded the camps. Sirens howled across the valley. Soldiers ran to the walls, and the overseers laughed like children, excited for violence. Humans, they said with contempt, spitting the word as if it tasted bad. Lyris had heard of humans only through propaganda, that they were savage, that they were thieves, that they poisoned worlds with rebellion, and that they should be crushed before their defiance spread. But she had also heard, in hidden whispers, that humans did not kneel easily, and that scared the Empire more than any weapon. The first human drop pods fell like burning stones beyond the ridge, and the ground trembled under Lyris's feet. She did not understand why humans would come to such a dead place, until she saw the chains on the workers, the collars that shocked them if they slowed, and she realized the humans were not here for resources. They were here for people. A firefight erupted near the pits. Plasma bolts lit the dust. Shouts echoed. Lyris tried to run, but her body was too slow, and a blast tore through the rock above her and shattered into glowing shards. A fragment sliced her side. Heat flooded her nerves. She stumbled. Another explosion threw her into a ravine. She hit the ground hard. Her vision blurred. Rain began to fall, thin and acidic, mixing with her blood. Soldiers shouted above. Boots scraped the rim. She lay there thinking this was a clean end at least, because no one would bother dragging her back to work. She closed her eyes. Then she heard a different sound. Not heavy alien boots. Lighter steps, quick, cautious. A shadow leaned over the edge. A human face appeared, smeared with ash, eyes sharp with fear and focus. He was not a monster. He looked tired, like someone who had been running for a long time and had decided he would keep running until the universe ran out. His arm was bleeding badly. He held a compact rifle that looked like it had seen too many fights. He stared at her, and Lyris waited for the shot, because that was what the Empire had taught her to expect from outsiders. The shot never came. Instead, the human lowered a rope, climbed down, and knelt beside her. He spoke in a low voice, not cruel, not mocking, just urgent. "Can you move?" He asked, and his translator turned the words into her language with a rough accent. She tried to answer, but coughed blood. He swore softly, and lifted her with careful strength, as if she mattered. She felt his heartbeat through his chest plate, fast but steady. Above them alien soldiers shouted, scanning with lights. The human pressed her against the rock wall and covered her with his cloak, then held his breath as beams passed over their hiding place. Lyris felt the heat of those beams. She waited for betrayal. The human stayed still, shielding her with his own body. When the soldiers moved away, he carried her deeper into the ravine, into tunnels carved by water, long ago dot in a small cave. He set her down and opened a medical kit with hands that shook from pain. He injected her with something that cooled the burning in her side. He gave her water from his canteen. He tore his own sleeve to wrap her wound tighter. He did all of it without asking who she was. When she finally managed to speak, she asked why. The human stared at her like the question itself was strange.